Hey guys, welcome back to the episode 3 of the Poke Table podcast. My name is Logan here at Sippy's Card Corner. I'm joined by
Alex with Poke Legends TCG.
awesome. Welcome, Alex. To
Hey.
start, Alex, how was this past week? We're business owners. We're in the thick of it. We kind of have a different bird's eye view of Pokemon and TCG and all that kind of stuff. I'm curious what your week as a business owner has looked like, over the past couple of days.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting week. So, guys, as store owners, we have those weeks where it's really up and down, right? There are things that happen. And this past week, for me, something happened. Wix reached out to me. That's where I host my website. They reached out to me and flagged my website as for selling potential counterfeit or fake products, basically. So, and we
Alex, do
get
you sell counterfeit or fake products?
that, no.
Just
So
you're on the record.
yeah. So Wix is very paranoid about getting sued by Pokemon. And I knew about this, from the very beginning because Brian from Poke and I talked about it a lot. And we get spam all the time about Wix is going to shut down your website if you don't do this, this, and this. So at first, I thought it was that. I thought it was just spam.
Sure.
And it wasn't until I saw there was a link to a ticket. There was an actual
Mhm.
ticket, and it
Yeah.
brought me to Wix support where I finally found out it was real. So they gave me a 3-day notice saying that they were going to shut down the Wix payment, the in-house Wix payment processor.
Hmm.
And they gave me a 3-day notice. And so
Yeah.
I talked to their support team, and they basically, after a ton of back and forth, there was nothing they could do. I offered to show receipts, for all my products being sold, that they're legitimate. There's nothing they could do.
That's
So after going back and forth, I set up a new payment processor with Stripe.
yeah.
So Wix has an add-on with Stripe that you can sync with your website. It's seamless, right? My customers won't even tell a difference. And so a few hours after I synced with Stripe, I got flagged again.
Hmm.
Okay, because look, everyone is super paranoid about getting sued by Pokemon, and there are a lot of websites that sell sketchy products, right?
Yep.
So I don't blame them for that. Now with Stripe though, they allowed me to defend myself. They wanted to see my receipts from all the products that I was selling on my store. I uploaded like a ton of them. Okay, like 100 different receipts going back 3 months, right? And like an hour later, they cleared me. So all in all, everything's good. But for a few days there, it was very scary. So for new store owners, if you're selling Pokemon cards on Wix, make sure you're keeping your receipts and make sure you have other payment processors that you sync your bank to. Okay, because this can happen, and it can happen with not just Wix, it can happen with Shopify and other platforms as well. So after after a few days though, finally everything's good. But yeah, interesting week for me.
Dude, that's so scary, honestly. Because I
Yeah,
remember, you mentioned Brian from Pokeani. I think all of us business owners have, in one way or another, kind of seen at least some of his videos. And I remember I
yeah,
was watching his videos when I first started out as well. And I remember, having that same topic come up, where it's like, whatever, e-commerce platform you're using, there is risk, when selling TCG products simply because they're afraid that because it's so easy to sell counterfeit stuff. It's so easy to scam people with TCG stuff,
yeah,
um, and so it really scared me. But
yeah.
I think I'm glad to hear that your shop is back up and running and things are solid. But yeah, like Alex mentioned, it's just something to be aware of. And at the very end of the day, it's motivation to stay organized and on top of all your receipts, everything that you've purchased, and all those good stuff. So, scary stuff, but
Yeah.
at least in Wix, scenario, it sounds somewhat fixable, if it happens to you. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad to hear that everything's good on your end.
Yeah. And again, guys, I want to reiterate, I stand by 100% everything that I sell on my
Yeah.
store. This
Yes.
was a false flag. So I
Yes.
want to make sure that that's put out there. Um, but yeah, no, I'm glad that everything's good, but it was definitely a scary few days
Yeah.
because there isn't a way to uplift, my website on Wix and put it on another platform.
Yeah.
It's exclusive to how I built it with Wix. There's no way I can just up and move it somewhere. And that at first is what I was really scared about. I thought at first, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to get another e-commerce platform altogether.
Yep.
So yeah, it was it was an interesting last few days.
And what you bring up is a good point. And one thing that I want to call out is that, if you find yourself in this situation where you do have to, you know, go and switch platforms, and that's why it's so important to have ownership of your customer list. And what I mean by that is your newsletter subscribers, right?
Yeah,
Because you can export those, that list, that giant list that you have, and plug it into another, platform so that while you might have to add, some more work to get your new site up and running, uh, your customers don't, suffer, and they're not lost. So that's another thing that is really powerful about having your own website is, you own, that list, you own that type of marketing.
yeah,
And so in that situation, you can kind of, shift and lift it, but doesn't make, the process, any less fun.
right, exactly. And that's a good segue into why we recommend having your own website for
Yeah.
your store. If you sell on TCG Player, you sell on eBay, you don't own like the customer information. Like you don't have the email address, you don't have their phone number, you don't have anything that you can use for secondary marketing. And then on top of that, you have extra fees typically
Right.
when you sell with eBay or TCG Player. So even though this was a very scary moment, or the scary last few days for me, I still recommend Wix and your own e-commerce platform. Your own website. I still 100% recommend that.
Yeah. And I think, if we're talking about sort of recommendations, at least for websites and just the idea of talking about your own store, you know, when you have your own site, it's a lot easier to associate customers with your brand, versus if you are selling on eBay or TCG Player, you are just one of, thousands of sellers, um, the what people mostly just they get is they click on your item, they click on your product, they see, oh, sold by this random company, random, store that, they're never going to think about again. Um,
Yeah,
and then they're on their way versus, if you do the work, you put in the effort to build a brand, your site, like people know that site, like for myself, it's like whenever I was first starting and I was sort of kind of looking at other sites that, I was kind of getting influence from, I was, I know those sites right now. Like, and what I mean by that is like I already associate, a site with this person or,
yeah,
this business. Like I know Brian's site. I know Pokey
yeah,
because, it's his site. And that's so powerful in terms of just the building that trust and building that loyalty, for your customer base.
yeah, yeah, exactly. You don't when you're buying from someone on eBay or TCG, there's no face, there's no brand.
Yeah.
It's just a product that you're adding to cart. It's a lot different when there's a face and a brand behind, a store.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
um, and that's one of the reasons why we tell new store owners, put your time into building your brand, put your time into putting your face in front of your customers, creating content. That is super important, and the number one thing that we both recommend to people aspiring to start their own store.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah. It's a grind for sure. And
Yeah.
we've talked about this before, but it's tough. But
Yeah.
you know, you have to put in the work if you want to, reap the rewards.
Yeah, yeah, and that it's the number one way to build trust with your customers. If
Yes.
they see your face in front of your store, you wear it on your back, you're always talking, in videos. People are going to be people are going to tend to trust you a little easier if the only thing you post are pictures of Pokemon cards. There's no face. There's nothing. There's no brand. So yeah, super super important.
Well, cool. Yeah, no, I'm glad that, your week ended on a solid note, Alex. You know, I had a recent drop last weekend. That was my big sort of English drop of the month. I try and do once of those, one of those every month. I know you're doing that too. I took
Mhm.
inspiration from you for doing that. So, I had my drop last week. Thought it went well. We sold out of everything at this point, I think. Maybe one
Heck
or
yeah.
two boxes, two items left. But
Mhm.
everything was sold out, and everything is shipped out. Everything is almost all of everything is delivered. So yeah, no, it was a good drop. I'm excited for everyone to get their cards, kind of open it and rip it. Um, and yeah, now I just focusing on next month, right?
Heck yeah, 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 and that's awesome, man. And I'm doing another big drop next weekend. So
Yeah,
hopefully, our next podcast, I can talk about how that went.
sweet.
But yeah, no, that's awesome, dude. I mean, there was a ton of stuff that you listed. It was one of your biggest drops that you've had so far, right?
Yeah, yeah. It was the biggest drop that I've had. It was bigger than the ones before, and like just trying to kind of outdo the last month. And I think even just a little bit. I think that's sort of the key to the growth. And so yeah, we're making progress. I'm excited about it.
Cool. That's awesome, man. So going into the questions from our
Sure. Yeah.
viewers, Logan, do we want to give the first question? Do we want to ask the first question from our viewers?
Sure. Yeah. No.
I think we've got three or four of them, guys. So
Yeah.
please, it's super awesome that you guys send us questions. We want a ton more of that. So, please do that, and you might hear your name called out, in our podcast. So
Yeah, yeah, no, it was it's a super cool thing that we're trying, and I think some of these questions are really good. Yeah, no, we can jump into the first one. So, I fielded some questions from Instagram on my story, and so we got Luke Clark 226. They asked, what are your thoughts on Mega Evolution and how it could affect the market? Alex, do you want to take a stab at that?
yeah, yeah. So interestingly enough, we received some news this week that Mega Evolution, at least half of it, is going to be delayed.
Hmm.
So it's going to be delayed. Some people are thinking late October, and some people are thinking even into November.
And
Now,
remind people when the actual release date is.
September 22nd, I
20,
believe.
it's something in the 20s. Yeah.
Yeah,
Late
yeah,
September.
22nd or 26th.
Yeah.
Um, but now it's going to be delayed into late October and into November. And then there are some YouTubers like Brian from Pokémon and I that are saying that the total allocation is supposed to be 8 to 10% more than Destined Rivals. But since half of it's getting delayed, that's not going to mean anything now. I
Hmm.
think I think that I think this is going to be a super hyped set. I think it's going to be if it's truly delayed, if half of it's truly delayed, then yeah, I mean, I think this set's going to go bananas. There's just not going to be enough to go around. And then you have the gold cards on the Japanese gold cards are going for $500 or $600 right now.
Yep.
Um, it's going to be crazy to see because these gold cards, guys, these are like some of the rarest cards that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And then if only half the set is getting released, it's going to be crazy to see how
And
high those cards go. And
and I,
that drives the value of the
right.
set.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly. And I want to call out, you have special sets. in English,
Yeah,
like Prismatic Evolutions, Black Bolt White Flare.
yeah,
These special sets, Pokemon does do sort of a delayed allocation. And what I mean by that is, um, they'll start off on release, releasing ETBs, poster collections, binder collections, sticker collections, all that stuff. And then later, a month later or so, then they'll release sort of the booster bundles and things like that. That is planned. That is planned, sort of a planned delay
yeah,
on Pokemon's part. And that's sort of to build, hype and release some of the ancillary products that are fun, binders, posters, things like that. And then later on, release just cards and packs. This is
yeah,
different. This is a regular set. This is a standard set like Dust and Rivals. Um, with Dust and Rivals, everything was released at once, or, at least everything in terms of, the allocations and things produced. This is a delay on Pokemon's part about, we are going to, give you the other half later. Um, and that's wild. I
yeah,
want to emphasize just how different that is
yeah,
than anything that we've seen, over the past year. Um, and it's I think it's telling about sort of what Pokemon anticipates sort of as we head into this new block, as we head into the holiday season.
mhm.
Um, and the hype that we're currently seeing, the hype that I think that they expect to hit. I think it's gonna be crazy.
Yeah. I'd love to be in a room with all Pokemon's like big wigs and like know what they're saying right now. Because they've got to think that this is, I mean, this is not good. Like
It's
for the TCG as a whole. I mean,
it's
getting this
weird.
set delayed when there's already this huge supply and demand problem. I mean, this is just gonna propel the hype train forward.
Yeah, and I think whether it's intentional or not,
Yeah,
they've been saying for months now how they're printing more, It's
yeah,
coming, guys, we promise. And, you know, whether or not it actually has in terms of reprints, we talked last episode about how they are printing prismatic evolutions to the ground, all of their ETBs, all of their new premium collection boxes that are hitting these wholesale stores like Costco and Sam's Club, um, but it's still not affecting anything,
yeah.
and like and so we're just in this point where I don't know what to think, right? Because we've heard that, Mega Evolution will get more product. We will see more cards being produced.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and we are so far away from MSRP. You know, like the last regular set was Destined Rivals, and booster boxes are like $100 more than MSRP right now.
yeah.
I mean, we're so far away, and then, yeah, hearing this news, it was a little bit of a gut punch, to be honest.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't know. I think we'll just have to wait and see. I do think, I mean, Luke Clark 226, to answer your question, I mean, I do think it's going to affect the market in big ways. I think we're already seeing, like Alex mentioned, huge cards, huge chase cards in the Japanese set. I can't imagine what those are going to look like in the English set.
Yeah,
I think, in terms of Black Bolt White Flare, the Japanese black and white rares, the Reshiram and Zekrom, are sitting around 200-ish,
yeah,
give or take. The English are over 400.
yeah. They're about double. Yeah,
Yeah, and so if we're seeing $500, Japanese chase cards, um, I'm scared of what the English is going to do.
I mean, they're already so rare, and then we're only getting half the set, in two increments from what it sounds like. Yeah, I mean, especially I think the first 6 weeks, especially, I think we're going to be seeing some truly crazy prices on those gold cards.
Yeah, man, I don't know. Yeah, it's gonna be weird. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, definitely.
yeah. But yeah, excellent question, Luke Clark.
Yes,
Thank you
thank you
for
for that.
thank you for sending that question over, and please continue to do that.
And we'll get
Uh,
into some more questions throughout the show.
yeah, we'll get into more questions. So in this podcast, we definitely wanted to steer, our talking points to newer store owners and those that are wanting to start their own store because
Mhm.
like what I mentioned earlier, and the sort of news for the week, there can be a lot of up and downs, and Logan and I really want to. If there's any advice we can give to you guys that'll help you, we definitely want to do that and make it a huge direction of our podcast.
Yeah, definitely. I think, Alex, I remember you and I were talking about this and brainstorming about it, months ago, kind of what we could talk about. And that's sort of the essence of this podcast is getting a POV of business owners. And, I'm not tooting my own horn, right? Like I'm a small guy. I'm a small, guppy
Hey,
in a big sea. But I think being transparent and open and honest about our experience and people that have less experience than us, people that have more experience than us. I think we want to open this podcast up to just talking about it and being open. So yeah, 100%. I think um, this podcast is built for you guys, and so yeah, I'd love to dive into some recommendations today.
yeah, for sure. And one of the things that's recommended by many store owners, like Brian from Pokémon, for example, is to start out selling in the international markets. So Japanese is the prime example. So for anyone that doesn't know, for selling Japanese Pokemon cards, the thing that's highly valuable about that is that everyone's on an equal playing field.
Yep.
There aren't any distributors in Japan that allocate wholesale Japanese Pokemon cards to people in America. So we're all buying it from a middleman. All
Yep.
of us are, no matter how big the store is.
Yep. Definitely.
So and there are cases though where bigger stores can buy a bulk amount and
Yeah.
get it maybe less per box in some cases. But other than that, we're all pretty much on an equal playing field.
Yep. And
So,
speaking of that, it's like you could be a store with no credit, and if you have the capital, buy 500 boxes at one time. You can, and you probably
yeah,
could get a discount. And my point in saying that is that I just emphasize that the entry point is really just capital.
it is. Yeah,
But yeah, no, Japanese is probably the recommended entry point for most businesses. Now, I do want to call out, we talked about it before, but we're heading into this new sort of timeline where the de minimis exemption is gone.
yep,
And what that means is that regardless of whether or not you're buying, one box from Japan or 500, you are going to be paying a new tariff on that order. And right now, it's sitting around 15. We'll see if that changes. Um,
yeah,
but I think what that means for newer businesses is it's a bigger risk up front, where you're buying, a more expensive order, and trying to sell it. And uh, that's a risk. But it's also sort of it also means that there's no difference between you and Brian from Pokiani, who's selling a ton of boxes,
exactly.
or just any of the other big stores.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about this in our first episode, but with that de minimis rule, that exemption going away, it doesn't make sense for anyone that wants Japanese Pokemon cards to open. It doesn't make sense for them to buy them directly from Japan anymore.
Yeah.
Um, because not only are you paying shipping, which is quite a bit,
Yep.
you have to buy, even when the de minimis exemption was in effect, you had to buy 5 or 6 boxes at least for, the price per box be worth it with shipping.
Yep.
But now, you're paying a tariff on top of that. So it makes very little sense to buy it directly from Japan now. It makes more sense to buy it from store owners, here in the States
Yep.
because they're offsetting those costs by the bulk, the bulk amount that they're buying. That makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
Um, and I also want to hit on this. So, for those that don't know, we recommend starting with selling from the international market because it is notoriously difficult to get an English distributor.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is
Yes.
extremely hard. And even like right now, for example, it's nearly impossible to get
Yeah.
a distributor because they can't supply enough product for the clients that they do have.
Right.
You look at Southern Hobby and some of these bigger distributors, they can't supply enough. And even the product they do supply, it's not at wholesale.
Yeah.
A lot of it is above even MSRP.
Yep.
So it's a really interesting time in the English market, but that's why we recommend starting international.
Right. Yeah. No, 100% agree. No, we're also in this point where there are some other up and coming languages and cards from other, countries outside of Japan that are seeing some hype. Do you want to maybe
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, yeah. So not only, can you buy Japanese cards, but there's also Chinese and there's Korean. So those are probably the big three,
Yeah.
Japanese, Korean, and Chinese. But the one that's really interesting to me is Chinese right now.
Yep.
And the big reason why is because in the Chinese market, there are a lot of exclusive art cards that you can't get in any other language.
Right.
They're exclusively Chinese Pokemon cards, and some of the art looks pretty wicked on some of them.
It's a really interesting time because you have a bunch of other international languages that have been making Pokemon cards for a long time. You have Thai, you have Indonesian, you have, like we
Yeah,
said, Korean, Japanese, English. All of these are in parity with each other. And what I mean by that is that we're all sort of in the same sets. Japanese comes out a little bit earlier than everything else, but English follows, just a month or two later. And that's how it is for all those other ones.
yeah,
Simplified Chinese is different because we've had traditional Chinese that is in sort of that the same parity as Japanese and English, and they're kind of together. But simplified Chinese is a market completely new. There's some history to it, but in modern times, it's completely new. And what I mean by that is that mainland China has not really had Pokemon take off like all these other countries, and so Pokemon has finally committed to creating a new simplified Chinese language for Pokemon cards. Um, but they're slightly different because they are playing catch up, is what you could say.
hmm
And what I mean by that is that right now, we are heading into the Mega Block. We just wrapped up Scarlet and Violet. We just wrapped up Black Bolt, White Flare, Glory of Team Rocket / Destined Rivals, Heatwave Arena, all that kind of good stuff.
hmm
Well, simplified Chinese is still, 2 years behind that. And so right now they are still printing, 151, you know,
yeah,
um, and it's not one thing that Pokemon understands, and Alex and I understand as well, is that there are people that buy Pokemon cards that are not just for their language. Heck, we sell Japanese cards. That's I don't speak Japanese, I don't read Japanese, but I
yeah,
like Japanese Pokemon cards. Pokemon understands that there are a lot of people out there like us, and right now, simplified Chinese. Why would we as U.S. Americans want to buy just another another set that's just different language, right? Like I don't sell Indonesian cards because I sell Japanese cards, and there's not a whole lot of incentive for me. With simplified Chinese, Pokemon understands that, And so they've introduced exclusives. And every set, at least, past couple ones, they've introduced exclusive simplified Chinese Pokemon cards in each set that you can only and will only ever get from those
Yeah.
sets to incentivize others to dip their hand into the simplified Chinese market and boost it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No.
So yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. And um, it's an interesting incentive when you agree because with like Japanese, Korean, there aren't that many exclusive Pokemon. I mean, the only thing different is the language. So you kind of hit on it a little bit and that's we're not given a very interesting incentive to sell in other languages. It's still
right.
the same art card. It's just in a different language.
Yep.
Um, so I think that you can only do that so much. But with Chinese having so many exclusives, um, I think that's really interesting. And guys, definitely keep an eye on the Chinese sets because I think that could be another segue that new store owners could use to start their business.
I mean, if I'm being honest, like as a business owner, I'm thinking about it, right? I
Okay?
think right now, as I mentioned, simplified Chinese is in a 151 era, I guess you could call it. So they've split it up into four different sets, 151, just to kind of keep it interesting. And in each of those sets, they've introduced, uh, a very targeted exclusive. And what I mean by that is that they're all Pikachu, related. And Pikachu is the mascot of Pokemon. We all
Yeah.
know that.
Oh, yeah.
And this last simplified Chinese 151 set, it's called Pokemon 151 Surprise. That's the name of the simplified Chinese set that just released within the past month or so.
Mhm.
The exclusive is a Gengar Pikachu illustration art rare in simplified Chinese. Um, Alex, that card is going for hundreds and if not thousands of dollars
Oh my
um,
gosh.
for this art rare,
Oh,
um, simply because it's exclusive and people are kind of they want that card and the only way they get it is to buy this set. Um, Now, I will say it's hard for me to imagine that that price stays. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't.
yeah.
But uh, what it tells me is that there is an appetite for these exclusives.
Yeah.
I'll pause there.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's going to be it's interesting, right? Because there are a lot of store owners, arguably even Brian from Poke&E, that when he started selling Japanese Pokemon cards, one of the reasons that he blew up the way he did, and there are other reasons too, right? Brian works his butt off. But one of the reasons is there weren't that many store owners selling Japanese Pokemon cards.
Yep.
And we're seeing the same right now with Chinese Pokemon cards. I can't even think of more than a couple store owners that sell it.
Yeah.
So, and now it will be interesting if TCG Player offer support for Chinese Pokemon cards because right now there isn't like an official marketplace for Chinese Pokemon cards, but there wasn't for Japanese either until recently.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean like I said, guys, that could definitely be a bandwagon that could take off. And I know Logan and I are both
Yeah.
thinking very, very heavily about buying some. So
Now, I want to play devil's advocate real quick.
yeah,
I with these simplified Chinese cards, the reason they have the exclusives is because they are reprinting a ton of other arts. And what I mean by that is, they're reprinting the same cards that we already saw 2, 3 years ago in Japanese and English 151. They're just printing exclusives, one or two cards in a set, to kind of entice people to buy that set. So what that means is that, you know, bulk isn't the right word for all of this because there are, good chases. But in
yeah,
terms of value, for example, the Bubble Mew, in simplified Chinese is a lot less valuable than English and Japanese. Um, And so, you know, you if you're looking to kind of get your bang for your buck, you're really just chasing after those exclusives. Now, those exclusives are sick. You know, I don't know if you've seen any of the artwork,
Yeah.
but the exclusives are very, very nice. They're very, targeted towards, the general Pokemon population. It's not some random Pokemon that no one knows about. It's most of them have been Pikachu. I see yeah, Pikachu is the big one.
Yeah.
And so it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, definitely, definitely. I would not go and buy 100 boxes of this stuff yet, guys. If you're
No,
just starting out,
no,
don't go and
I'm
buy.
not going to be doing that.
Don't go all in. If you're gonna do it, definitely kind of tip your toe in.
But I
Um,
think it's worth exploring
I
for sure.
definitely think it's worth exploring. Yes, for sure.
So keep an eye out on the next for the
Yeah.
next Super Chinese launch.
Yeah, and that's most likely gonna be something we talk about, in our episodes to come to see
Yeah,
to kind of
definitely.
keep an eye on how that's doing. So, but yeah, that could bring us into a good segue into our next question.
Mans you're with asked from Instagram, by the way,
Oh,
cheapest Rayquaza card to invest in. Um, I'm gonna be honest, I don't have the market prices for Rayquaza cards off the top of my head. But I do want to call out something very interesting when it comes to pricing in this Pokemon, and the current card market for this card or for this Pokemon. So when we're talking about Rayquaza, Rayquaza is one of the most beloved Pokemon in the entire franchise, um, and it's they've created a lot of really nice and valuable cards for it. And there's this idea that when people are thinking about what to invest in, they're thinking, okay, well, I know that this card it has been this way and it's going up, it's going down. Is now the right time to buy it? Um, well, I want to call out something, and we have within the past 2 months or so, we've heard news that there is going to be a new Japanese set that releases sometime in the near future, and it's called Storm Emeralda. And we have, educated guesses that this will be a Mega Rayquaza set in Japanese that will translate over to English.
yeah,
Um, and we are not the only people to know this. We did not come up with that. There's a lot of smarter people out there that knew about it before even the general public was aware of it. But my point is, um, we are already at a point where people are aware that this is coming, and that the hype will continue to build as more things get announced by it. And that just means that previously released Rayquaza cards are already getting priced into that hype. I'll stop there, but just want to start the conversation with that.
yeah. No, I think there's going to be two waves, right, with Rayquaza in particular. First one already happened with where we got news of a new set coming out that's
Yep.
most likely going to be headlined by Rayquaza. But the next one will be when they do the reveal.
Yep.
So when they do the reveal, Rayquaza, every major Rayquaza hit will go up in price, is what I'm
Yep.
guessing. But one of the things I recommend when it comes to investing, and also keep in mind, investing is always a gamble, no matter what. But one of the things I do recommend is look for look for styles of cards that Pokemon has done once or twice, and then they haven't done again. So one of the examples is the Rainbow Secret Rares.
Yep.
Pokemon did that once, and it doesn't look like they're going to do it again. So I know that there's a secret rare Rayquaza, so that one could be a good one to invest in. But I think that Rayquaza cards in general are going to go bananas. It's been since Evolving Skies, since when it was the last time there was a major Rayquaza hit, and Evolving Skies happened what 5 years ago,
Jeez, has it
something
been?
like that. Isn't
Yeah.
that crazy? It's been 5 years since about 5 years since Evolving Skies,
Yeah.
something like that. Um, So yeah, excellent question. But really, I don't think you could go. Basically, our answer is I don't think you could go wrong, as long as the hit card in Rayquaza for, um, Emerald. Is it Emerald Storm?
Storm and Ralda, I think
Storm Emeralda. That's
it's
right.
called so far. Yeah,
As long as they do, as long as the art card for that looks cool,
somewhat
I
decent.
think you can't go wrong.
Yeah, I think, if you're trying to beat the all of the hype, the time to invest was 3 months ago before it was announced.
Yeah,
The next best time to invest in is like yesterday.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
uh, I think, and the third best time is now. So,
Right.
it kind of doesn't matter, as long as you kind of think about, you know, investing and pulling the trigger before it's really revealed and announced, and we start to see artwork, and that's when the hype is going to be built. And
Yeah.
up to a month before, I think there's still room to grow. And heck, I think even after it's released, you're just going to be paying, the margins are going to be slimmer, right? Because you're going to be paying more to invest in this card, and then the gains will just be smaller.
No, an excellent question. Thank you for posing that. And, very very cool question, and please continue to do that.
Yes, please.
Um, but so Logan, we talked about the international markets. What do you think about other TCGs? So there's Magic the Gathering, there's One Piece, there's Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yep.
What do you think, and particularly new store owners, what do you think about them selling other TCGs besides Pokemon?
So, I mean, I think it depends on sort of what your brand is, right? I
Mm.
think that if you start off with your branding being, a kind of a hodgepodge of TCGs, you love TCGs, you love selling any, cards, and you are genuine about it. You really are genuine about, you know, oh, you are interested in Yu-Gi-Oh, you are interested in One Piece, you are interested in Pokemon, Magic Gathering, whatever. I think you can do that. You're offering a variety, and that's cool. And as long as you come off as knowledgeable and genuine, I think that's fine. The problem is, well, I won't say it's a problem. What I'll say from my experience is that I have branded myself as a Pokemon, store.
Yeah.
Not to say that I can't ever dive into other TCGs, but I've branded myself as a Pokemon store, and my followers, my audience, my customers know me as the guy that sells Pokemon cards. Um, doesn't mean I can't hop on, the One Piece bandwagon and sell One Piece. It's just not what I have branded myself as, and I think that, um, I don't have a One Piece audience. Maybe there is an overlap, but I have not intentionally made that overlap happen. And so if I were to randomly start selling them, I think that that would be harder for me than selling Pokemon cards. Um,
Mhm.
but I do think that there is a time and place for it. Um, that's just sort of where I'm coming from, in my personal brand.
Yeah, no, uh, I think that's a good. I think that's a good argument. If you built your store with the sort of Pokemon brand, then I definitely think you should stick to Pokemon at least until you establish yourself,
Right.
right? Like, great example. Again, I hate to keep going back to it, but Brian from Poke&E, he built a his brand behind Pokemon.
Yeah.
But once he was established, he started branching out into other TCGs. Now, something I want to put out there though, the only TCGs that have really stood the test of time,
Yeah.
in my opinion, has been Magic the Gathering and Pokemon. And
Yep.
Magic the Gathering very rarely has supply issues. Like I don't remember them, and except for very recently, right? There's been a lot of hype behind the Final Fantasy crossover, Marvel, and the upcoming Avatar
Yeah.
crossover could
Right.
be nuts.
Yeah.
But I don't remember there ever being. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't remember there being really supply shortages for MTG. Um, so I mean, that could be a little bit harder to enter into the market, right? Because if there's a TCG that's um, where the supply is abundant, then you know, typically it's so saturated. It's hard. It's just a lot harder to build your customer base.
Yeah.
And then maybe you can make an argument for Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah.
Um, because that one's been around for a while, but it's not nearly as popular now. I think its heyday was in like the mid 2000s.
Yep.
Um,
You know,
but
and
it's not nearly as popular now.
not trashing any of
Yeah, yeah,
these TCGs. There's a huge audience and huge following for all of them.
yeah.
But if we're being honest and open about operating a TCG online store,
Yes.
these are the kind of questions and answers that we're fiddling around in our heads with. As store owners, I'm like, we have an opportunity. Do we take it or do we leave it?
Yep.
And one thing that I wanted to point out is, uh, you mentioned how MTG and Pokemon have been the ones to really stand the test of time. There is also no other. I don't want to be so broad because there's probably other examples as well. But at least in the TCG realm, there is no other TCG where every single set that has ever been released over time that has appreciated like Pokemon has.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a
With
good point. Yeah.
with with Magic the Gathering, there absolutely are stinkers.
Yeah.
There are sets that are dirt cheap because no one wants it and no one
Yeah.
has wanted it. Versus Pokemon, like you can't you there like I said, it's so easy to just say it. Like
Yeah.
Pokemon will only you don't want to use the G word, you don't want to say guarantee,
Yeah.
but there is a good chance that Pokemon will only ever go up. And as a store owner, that's something you have to factor in, right? Because there are times when the market dips. We are obviously not in that time right now. But as business owners, we have to anticipate that that does happen.
Yeah.
And there will be times where you're not able to sell your product very easily. And you know, do you want to be in a TCG where you've you know bought all this product that never sold, and then in 5 years it's still worthless, because then you absolutely are down. You have lost money. Versus Brian has talked about it, Alpha Investments, Rudy on his channel, he's talked about it. There are sets that don't sell at the moment, but 5 10 years later, these sets are worth hundreds, thousands.
Yeah.
And they're having to slow the roll of people wanting to buy them from their store. Um,
Yeah.
just more food for thought, I think.
Yeah, and sort of some more food for thought too. Like, so one of the reasons why that is because, and there's very little exceptions to this. Pokemon will print, a particular art for a card one time, and they'll
Yeah,
never do it again. There'll never be another, you know, not counting the celebration set. And the
yeah,
celebrations, you
it's its
still
own
have
thing. Yeah,
the sort of Pikachu in the corner of the card, but they'll never do first edition base set cards again. Like that'll never happen. It happened one time in 1995, and they'll never do that again.
they're not printing more Moonbreons.
They're
It's
not
over.
printing more Moonbryons.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, so I think that's part of the reason why sets tend to appreciate over time because once the cycle is over, that's it. That's all there's ever going to be.
yeah,
Um, so I think that's an interesting thing to kind of keep in mind as to the why Pokemon tends to just appreciate over time.
yeah. Definitely
I
agree.
mean, I can't even think of a single set that hasn't appreciated over time. Even like
There isn't
standard
one.
sets.
There isn't one.
There-
There literally isn't one.
Like I know Steam Siege was
Yeah,
a fairly unpopular, probably one of the most unpopular ones in recent years. And even that, the sealed booster boxes are going like crazy.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
exactly. So, just something to think about. I think,
Yeah.
kind of bringing it back to the question, would you recommend selling other TCGs? Um, and my answer is unless you've built your brand around other ones and have a genuine passion for the ones that you're selling, um, at least starting out, I would I would not recommend it. I think, you should adopt the mindset of less is more when it comes to starting out. And,
Yes.
and I mean that in a lot of different ways. Limiting,
Yes.
whatever TCG you're selling, limiting the amount that you sell. You're not buying a ton of boxes, um, but really focusing in and honing in on how can I be the best seller of this? How can I establish a brand? How can I build an audience of customers that really just want to buy this singular product? Um, that's how I would think about it.
Yeah, and one last thing to add. So one of the reasons why I think building your brand after Pokemon, I think is I wouldn't say easiest, but probably the most recognizable is that people like the Pokemon brand is like even soccer moms, even people that
Yeah,
have never collected Pokemon in their lives, they still recognize what Pokemon is.
right.
They see like a Pokeball like on your brand. They know
Yep.
what, okay, they know that you're a Pokemon shop. Um, versus some of the others, I don't think they're as recognizable. If I showed like, you know, a Yu-Gi-Oh card to my mom, for example, she'll have no idea where that came from. So I think Pokemon is definitely a lot more recognizable.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk forever about why I think Pokemon is the biggest brand in the world. But yeah, yeah, no, it's just it's an easy one to go for. And again, I want to bring it back to do what you're passionate about. If you really are passionate about, why Schwartz, for example. I don't know anything about that card, that card game. But if you like that card game and you want to build a brand around it and you want to sell cards about it, commit to that. Okay, so I know that we just talked a lot about other TCGs, selling international stuff. I want to round out sort of this recommendation segment of this episode and really talk about whether or not selling sealed versus singles is something that, you or myself recommend to other businesses. You can sell sealed product that's Japanese, English, whatever, or you can sell singles. You can sell bulk. You can sell art rares, illustration rares, or sealed or not sealed slabs. Graded cards, graded chase cards. I want to get your take, Alex. Do you sell sealed, or do you sell singles? Is what I mean. And if you do, why do you sell those? And if you don't, why not?
Yeah, no, great question. So currently, I do sell singles
Okay.
on my website, but I am thinking more and more about getting out of selling singles, and
Okay.
I'll tell you why. So when you have capital to put into buying products for your business, the things that are going to be a lot more resilient when it comes to market swings is going to be sealed.
Yeah.
We just talked about how sealed product pretty much always goes up over
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Um, but with singles, there can definitely be big market swings. They're
Right.
a lot more volatile to market swings than sealed, and it's even worse for like slabs.
Yep.
You send your Pokemon cards out to get graded. You get them back in 2 months. Not only is it a gamble because there's such a huge difference between a PSA 10 and a
Right.
9. It's like crazy. Like a PSA 9 typically is worth about as much as raw, for modern at
Yeah.
least. Um, so not only do you have that gamble, but the market could have changed so much, and the 2 months that it took to get your cards back.
Right.
Um, we already deal with a lot of uncertainties
Hmm.
in this business, and that's one that I want to eliminate. So that's
That's
kind
fair.
of that's kind of my take. Now, if you're starting out though,
Yeah.
I do think singles are easier to get than sealed, especially now. Um, so starting out selling singles to build your brand, I definitely recommend doing that for people that start out. Like singles are a lot easier to obtain
Right.
than really anything else. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, that's my take.
Sure. Yeah. So a couple things. I agree. In terms of starting out, I think, heck, you could start with just selling your collection, right? If you're in the market for, looking to sell, it's like you could start a business by selling your own cards that you've obtained. and that's
Yeah.
quote unquote free. But uh, yeah, I think selling singles um, is definitely a way to do things. My take is that it is just a lot of work. I
Yeah.
think kind of what Alex was saying. I think of singles as like stocks.
Yeah.
You sealed is more like index funds where you're taking a whole chunk of the market, and over time it usually trends upwards.
Yeah.
With slabs, with singles, uh, the margin can be so small, and it just takes one dip, and all of a sudden you're drowning.
Yeah.
And I think you can do it, but
Yeah.
like I said, I think it's a lot of work, and I think you got to be really on top of it. I
Yeah.
think that there are reason why vendors can make a lot of money with singles, but they're vendors for a reason.
Yeah.
They're putting in the time and the effort to go to all these different card shows, where they're selling, all of their inventory and buying new stuff all within, just a couple of days. Versus if you're buying stuff and putting it on your site, um, it could sit for a while. And I think that that's just another risk that you're adding on top of that. Now, I will say, I think I've seen some other stores have some success when they sell, raw, you know, illustration rares or art rares. And you can buy a ton of those for cheaper, and these are, a bunch of $3, $4 cards. And you can sell them for 5, 6, $7.
Yeah.
Um, and make a quick buck. But there's also work in terms of getting that up and inventoried on your site, and having all of it set up so that
It's
when you
scale,
yeah, the scale
right? It's
is really
scale. Yeah.
tough. Um,
Yeah.
and
Where
so
where are you gonna store thousands of singles? How are you gonna if you get a sale on one, how are you gonna easily go and find it? How are if you have, you know, you have to sell so many to make a decent amount of money. So how long does it take you to ship 100 singles?
yeah,
100 singles to 100 different addresses.
well,
Uh,
and that's the thing
yeah,
is it's your time.
yeah,
That's the biggest I think cost in my mind is
yeah,
are you spending a full week, getting, these because Alex and I both have full-time jobs.
yeah,
We have a life outside of, our work and Pokemon. Where are you going to find that time to catalog all of it, to store
yeah,
it properly,
yeah.
Um,
How are you going to handle 10 different customers messaging you a day asking to see a closer look of the card?
dude,
The front and
great
back.
call.
They,
Yeah.
oh, no, that's not good enough. They want a video. You got to do a video of showing. I mean, it's the scale is
Yep.
the biggest problem of selling singles. Now, that's not so much of a problem of people starting out.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Perfectly reasonable to start selling singles, starting out to build your brand. But eventually, you're going to run into scale issues.
Yep.
Um,
And pretty quickly, right?
yeah, yeah,
Like, you know, selling more than 25 is going to be is where it starts to take up a lot of time,
yeah,
and again, there are people that do it very successfully, make a
yeah,
lot more money as a business than, Alex and I do combined.
yeah. Oh,
But
yeah,
uh, you know, starting out, in terms of what you want to spend your time on, you got to decide that.
yeah,
That's your choice. So that's sort of what I would say in terms of selling singles versus sealed. I think sealed, um, it's a matter of getting product. But if you can figure out ways to do that and still make a profit, I think that's the recommendation that I have.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and sometimes, you know, you do have to put your money into things that you can obtain. Because, like I said, you have cards from international markets that you can obtain fairly easily if you have the capital. But if you don't have, what would you say, Logan, $1,000 to start out?
Yeah.
I mean, it could get a little. You could be at a disadvantage of selling of buying cards from international markets because the price per box, when you include the tariff and shipping, um, you're going to be at a disadvantage with other stores. Um,
Yeah.
so singles may be the way to go in order to build your brand. So um,
Yeah.
that's
And,
my take.
you know, one thing that I want to call out is cheap versus expensive singles. You
Oh
know,
yeah, true.
I think selling, if you, like you said, if you have $1,000, there's a balance, right? You could buy two, PSA 10 chase cards for $1,000. Okay, well, you know, how are you going to sell those?
Yeah,
You go into trade shows, you can do that. Or you can, market the heck out of it on your socials if you have an audience. That's one option. Or you could buy, 500, uh, cheap illustration rares. Okay, well, it's there's a lot more to sell. The profit margin could be a little bit bigger, right? If you're only spending, well, example, $2, and you resell for six, that's a good amount of profit. But
sure.
now you're dealing with that scale that we talked about.
Right.
Um, so there's a lot of nuance, I think, when selling singles that a lot of people are not really aware of.
Yeah.
That I just want to call out
Yeah.
as owners of businesses that have thought about this ourselves and maybe even tried it. But I think that's important.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good stuff. So last topic, guys, before we leave you, Logan, let's talk about some recommendations of for new store owners. Let's recommend some things to steer clear of
Sure.
when starting out.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I did when starting out was I bought lots on Facebook. First, that's when I first started out, like first couple months of me, starting my business. Use PayPal goods and services for everything when buying stuff from other people, especially on Facebook, because like you buy the card using Zelle or Cash App or whatever, and then they just never send it to you. Or what they send you isn't what you asked for. Maybe it's fake or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, so I got burned a couple times doing that. So
Sure.
PayPal goods and services, guys, every time. And if a seller says they don't offer PayPal goods and services, do not buy from them.
Red flag.
Major red flag. Yes. Major red flag. If they say, oh, my PayPal got hacked 99 out of 100 times, they're just full of crap. Um,
Yeah. What?
no,
Yeah.
no matter how genuine they sound, no matter what they say, PayPal goods and services every time.
Yeah. I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's an easy one for sure.
Yeah.
I think if I reflect back on when I first started, I've talked about it before. I think something to steer clear of um, is just getting in over your head. When you're
Yeah.
starting out, I have said that when I first started out, I was super excited. I was super passionate. I was starting my own business. I've always wanted to do that, and I was doing it in an industry that I loved, Pokemon. I played Pokemon, grew up on Pokemon all my life. So I was like, heck yeah, this is super fun. I'm
Yeah.
so excited. I'm gonna buy all these products. I'm gonna offer them up, and you know everyone's gonna be so excited to have them, and buy from me, and everything will be good, and I'll just grow from there. I really underestimated building an audience, having a customer base to even buy from. I remember that I bought so much Japanese product to begin with, thinking that oh, I'll sell this, and it's a lot of capital to have invested in that, and it's for a long time it burned me. It took a long time to sell some of that stuff,
Yeah.
especially because like I was I was in a I was in a point where I was mid set, and what I mean by that is like I had started that I decided that I wanted to do this, and bought product after Japanese release had happened. And Alex and I have talked about this. The Japanese launch is such a narrow window where you'll see a
Yeah,
lot of success,
yeah,
versus after 3, 4, 5 weeks, we're already on to the next set.
yeah,
There's already hype building for the other one.
yeah,
Um, and so, like, I had bought, a ton of product mid-set, and by the time, the next one was out, it's like I didn't have any capital to buy that, until halfway through that set. And
yeah,
so, I had never timed it well enough to sell at the beginning of a launch. And I ended up buying a ton of product and having a ton of inventory that just no one really wanted at the time. And I think that was a mistake.
yeah.
I've learned from it, but that's something that I want people to be aware of.
Yeah, for sure. Start slow, guys. I mean,
Start
that's what I'd recommend. Start slow. Don't go all in on anything. Don't overly invest in anything, especially when starting out.
Yeah.
Build slow. Um, and so one last thing that I'll throw out there is when creating content, when getting in front of your customers, it's very easy to get disappointed about how fast you grow
Yep.
starting out. It's very easy to just get demoralized because
Yep.
I have definitely experienced that. And Logan, I don't know if you have too,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah. So because sometimes look, you could put hours into a video and then not do well. Or you could be grinding all week, video upload every day, doing everything you're supposed to do, and then get $0 in sales that week.
Yep.
That happens. And it still happens to me and Logan both. It
Yep.
still happens where we'll put hours into a video and that does well, and it just doesn't do that well. So there's going to be ups and downs. And if I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but if that is very difficult for you to handle, then I would not start an online shop
Yep.
or a TCG store in general because there is always going to be ups and downs and stress.
Yep.
Um, so I definitely wanted to throw that out there. It's part of the business. It's always going to be part of the business, no matter how big we get. And in a lot of cases, it's probably going to get worse the bigger that we get.
Right. Yeah. More
Yeah.
stresses.
I just talked about earlier in the video the news for the week that I had about Wix reaching out to me about a false flag
Yep.
of selling fake and counterfeit products. Of course, I don't sell fake or counterfeit products,
Right.
but these are things. But things happen outside of your control, um, and there are market swings. There are a lot of risks. We talked a lot about those in this podcast and in our last podcast. Um, so that's what I just wanted to throw that out there,
No,
just to be
I
aware of.
100% agree. I started my business about a year ago now. It might have been, we're probably at a year. I was dead in the water for like 8 months. Not even kidding. Like, and that's a long time to be trying things and having them consistently fail.
Yeah,
And it's like I'm not. I still have so much to do, right? Like, there's
yeah,
still so many things ahead of me that are gonna come up, and um, it's like I'm still trying to grow and be better, and there's still things that come up. And so it's like, absolutely, there are so many things that you cannot foresee, and so many things that you might think that are in control, and you're actually not. It's like, when you're building your brand on social media, it's like you're at the mercy of the algorithms.
yeah,
There's a lot that you can do, and you can get better. But there are some videos where it's like you'll put out a lot of work and think this is going to be a banger, and then it bombs. And you know, it's a matter of getting up and doing it again, no matter
yeah.
how poorly or disappointed you feel. Um, the
You
only
have to
way
commit. You have to
you have
commit
to
to the
commit.
grind, no matter what. No matter what your results were the day before, or even even if you're going a week,
Yep.
2 weeks worth of duds, you still have
Yep.
You still have to create content. It is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And just understand that, okay, in a year, 2 years, 3 years, as long as you're grinding, as long as you're committing to improving and thinking about how to get better and actually committing to do that in, a year, 2 years, 3 years, you're gonna thank yourself. But
yeah.
it's not easy.
Yeah,
It's not easy.
and last thing I'll add, guys, if you go to any one of our Instagrams, me or Logan's, and you look at some of the very first videos and you compare them to now, there is a night and day difference. And it's
Yeah.
because we got better,
Yeah.
right? We kept getting better. We kept getting better about making videos.
Yep. Exactly.
Like Logan's had a couple videos that popped off for 50,000 plus views. It's
Yeah.
insane. But his first videos, I mean, they're like a couple hundred,
Oh,
so
I was through the roof if I got over 500.
yeah.
Like that was like, man, like we're eating good tonight.
Yeah, exactly. So even though guys, you're gonna have some duds starting off, and everyone does. You're gonna keep getting better though. Okay, you're
Yep.
gonna keep getting better. So commit to the grind. So yeah, that's the last thing. Last thing I'll
Yeah.
add.
And there's a lot that we're going to talk about over the, couple episodes and,
Yeah,
and into the far future. So please subscribe, please like this video, please
yeah.
leave comments and questions, because there's a lot that we still have to cover.
Oh yeah,
And the more that you ask and interact and engage with our stuff, the more it tells us, okay, people are interested in this.
yeah,
And it's like I know that as an early business owner, I would have loved this content.
yeah.
Um, and so please, if you made it this far, please like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. But yeah, no, Alex, anything that you want to leave us out on before we call it for the day?
Yeah, no, guys, if you enjoy this content, please share this. Please
Yep.
share this. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and please fill your questions out to us. We'd love to have them here on the podcast and answer them for you guys. So yeah, that's what I'll add. Yeah,
Cool. All right. No, I think this was a good episode. I'm excited for the next one. I know
yeah,
we got a lot of other stuff that we didn't get to cover today that we're going to cover next time, and we'll keep it rolling.
yeah.
That's it
And,
for me
and we're
though.
working on having our first guest on the
That's true.
podcast. So hopefully, maybe next weekend or the weekend after, we'll have our first guest. So I'm
Yeah,
super excited about that.
and that will be sort of like getting another perspective from another business owner.
Yeah,
Instead of Alex and I talking to each other, we'll have someone else. And the idea is to have more people join that want to share their experience, their perspective. Maybe today we talked about singles versus seal. Maybe we bring on someone who only sells singles and they've seen a ton of success.
yeah,
And they can give us some tips and tricks on how they did that.
sure.
So yeah, again, if you're into that kind of content, please like, subscribe, comment, and we'll get to it.
Yeah,
But
yeah. And if you're a new store owner and if you want to be on the podcast, please
yeah,
reach out to us.
yeah, we'd
We'd
love to
be
have you.
we'd be happy to talk about having you on the podcast as a guest as well. So don't be shy to reach out to me or Logan.
Cool. All right. Well, that's it. I think for us then. We will see y'all next week. Thank y'all for watching.
All right. Thanks, guys, and thanks for tuning in to the Poke Table.
See y'all.
See you guys.